Hi, and welcome back to Civil Discourse, a program sponsored by the American Civil Liberties Union of Greater Jacksonville, Florida. My name is Ken Hurley, and today, this month, we have a wonderful guest. He's a special agent in charge of the FBI of the Jacksonville, North Florida region. His name is Bob Cromwell. Bob, I'm very happy that you're here.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, there's so much to get involved with, and you represent an organization that is constantly in the news, on the front lines of so many troubling issues that America has to confront, and you do wonderful work, but somehow the press, I mean, there's examples of press, you know, cartoons, a local cartoon here, poking fun at the FBI, and the FBI knew this and didn't do that, and there's all sorts of issues that are real controversial, dating way back to even the beginning of the FBI, with J. Edgar Hoover staying there for nearly 50 years, Leonard Peltier, Martin Luther King, Adam Clayton Powell, CONTELPRO. I mean, there are all sorts of issues that are troubling. But what I want to ask you right up front, relative to the ACLU, something I get charged with all of the time by people who really don't seem to understand what the ACLU is about. That the ACLU is a communist organization. Coming from an FBI, the special agent in charge, is there any evidence that suggests that?
The reality of it is, in a communist environment, the ACLU couldn't exist. The ACLU is actually a vital function in our society. Our democracy is based on checks and balances, and the government should not be too powerful. So the ACLU is there to try to keep the government in check. It makes sense to me.
Well, I appreciate hearing that. It makes sense to me, and one of the things that I wish we could get better at in America is teach what it means to have civil liberties, teach what it means to have civil rights in the middle school, in the high school, and every single year during the public school years, so children have an appreciation of what it is to have a Constitution and a Bill of Rights. I think we've fallen way behind on that, and when people grow up into an adulthood, they have misconceptions about what it is unless they actually get involved in educating themselves and as adults.
I think when you talk about civil rights, what's critical there is children need to be exposed to training on diversity, and they need to understand that if society is diverse, for society to function correctly, the various agencies, take the FBI for instance, we need to be diverse. If you take the business case for diversity, which is now an accepted standard, it's not the politically correct thing they're saying there, it's the correct business statement, is if you reflect the population that you serve, your bottom line, your profit margins are going to be better. If you know, in other words, if you have a diverse customer base, you need to have a diverse sales organization. Well, we in the FBI, our customer base is everybody in this country. We need to reflect the population of this country. We're doing better, but we've got a long way to go. But it's a major issue. It's very important to Robert Mueller, the director of the FBI, that we get more diverse, and it's something that we are addressing in many ways.
To Robert Mueller's credit, he participated in a national ACLU membership conference about 2 years ago, where he stood in front of about 1,500 ACLU members and supporters and fielded questions from the ACLU. They were written on cards, and he gave up of his time, and he explained to us what the FBI was about. And that's what I'm hoping you can do here, because there's so much we can talk about that's controversial. But I want you to talk about some of the good things that the FBI does that doesn't make it to the media. But first I want to ask you, are all the agents in the FBI special?
That's actually what that means, special agent, is if you're an agent of the government, it gives you somewhat unlimited powers. A special agent has very specified powers. So actually the word special restricts the authority, restricts the jurisdiction. We're saying special agent. Simply agent is all wide open.
Are there members of the FBI who are only called agents?
No,
or is
all of us who are agents are special agents, and then we have a large contingency of professional support. Large contingency.
That are not agents or special agents, but part of the FBI.
Yeah, if you're an agent in the FBI, you're a special agent by definition.
And isn't that an historical term that has come up through the years? That's always been a special agent?
Again, because our powers are limited. We have powers limited by law, by legislation, and Attorney General guidelines. So we have very specific parameters. We have about 300 violations that we're responsible for addressing. Prior to 9/11 of 2001, every FBI office in the country, there's 56 divisions in the country, every office established its own priorities based on the threat within that community, within that field office. After 9/11, Director Mueller correctly stated that our priorities are going to be universal across the board now. Our number one priority is counterterrorism. Our number two priority is counterintelligence. When we talk about that, people don't understand where we're coming from when we say counterintelligence. It's not what most people think. It has to do with the theft of not just government secrets, not just the penetration of the government, but it has to do with the theft of trade secrets. It's estimated that more than $200 billion in trade secrets are stolen every year in this country. If you are a businessman and you spend millions of dollars on R&D and then turn around and have someone from a foreign country come in and take that, spending a couple $100,000, money well spent by them, but it affects our economy, it certainly affects you. So people don't realize, but that's a lot of what we're doing there in the counterintelligence venue. Following that is cybercrime. Now, you've just seen Choice Point was in the news.
Right, with
150,000, well, no, 150,000 of their, well, 150,000 of their records were compromised. Everyone watching, chances are, has a Choice Point record. Used to be, everybody would say, that, you know, Big Brother is watching you, the government is watching you. Well, in reality, it's not Big Brother, it's big corporations that are watching you. We rely on them to come forward with lots of the record checks that we do. Again, though, after cybercrime, though, we're still very much involved in public corruption. That's a big issue for us. Civil rights is a big issue for us.
It's a big issue for the ACLU,
we take civil rights very seriously, and that goes back to the diversity issue. We preach diversity to police departments also, because if a police department reflects the population it serves, you're going to have less complaints of civil rights violations.
Now, when you're talking diversity, you're talking about male, female, black, white, racial, gay, lesbian,
all forms of diversity.
All the above.
If you reflect the population you serve. If you look where I came from and where I was the section chief, basically I was responsible for hiring in the FBI. I had a good contingency of African American, had a large contingency of females. These were primarily professional support people. I had a large gay contingency. Very, very professional group, overall group of people we're dealing with here, from every race you can think of just about, from every sexual preference you can think of just about, and all working together, accomplishing our goals of hiring people in a time when hiring was very, very critical. All of those people need representation, and all those people need to be honored for who they are and what they bring to the table.
And regrettably, it doesn't always happen that way.
That's correct.
I mean, in the news, we have amendments now being proposed by the administration or supported by the administration regarding gay marriage that they want to make. They want to codify marriages between a man and a woman and prevent people from entering into a contract based on their gender. And that just smacks of something that is antithetical toward what the ACLU would support.
It seems to me, well, from what I've heard, is they've been talking about wanting to protect the sanctity of marriage without necessarily disallowing the potential for civil unions. Personally, I mean, I'm heterosexual. However, just a matter of fundamental fairness, I think that the gay folks out there should have the same basic rights. If gay partners are together for 20 years and one of them becomes ill, the other one should be able to visit them in the hospital.
That's right.
So I'm not going to enter into an endorsement of gay marriages. It's not my place to, but I certainly think, I certainly support and defend their right for basic civil rights.
Well, even the Government Accounting Office, I mean, I know we're not here necessarily specifically to speak about this, but they list about 1,100 rights that are conferred upon an individual, federal rights that are conferred once you enter into a contract of marriage. And various states have 200, 300, or 400 other rights.
Right.
But if civil unions, each state may or may not do that, they will only get the rights that that particular state and lack the portability of your marriage going across the country of America, and that seems to be problematic. That's why, I mean, I can go on the record as saying I oppose the federal amendment proposal that is being talked about now, because it actually prevents somebody based on gender, based on sexual orientation from entering into a contract that others can freely do.
Correct.
And it denies them rights that if that's the way, and certainly gays are not new in society, in civilization. I'm going to suggest they've been here from the beginning of time and will be here through the end of time.
I have known very productive agents and very productive support people in the FBI who are gay and lesbian, very productive. And years ago, they were talking about the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, which I think is still out there on a table somewhere, which would afford people protection based on sexual preference when it came to the current civil rights laws. And a person couldn't be discriminated against in the workplace based on their sexual preference. And I think that's still on the table.
Well, so what, I mean, that's very commendable. I mean, you come across as one of the, a nice gentleman, how long have you been in the FBI yourself? How long
I've been an agent for more than 21 years now.
So you probably wind up retiring from the FBI,
I certainly hope so.
I would presume,
Yeah.
And then may you have a long, productive career. But what does it look like in terms of what you can say about the terrorist threats that we have? I know an oncologist who deals in blood disorders and cancers of the blood, and she sees cancer everywhere. And I know an ornithologist, a bird watcher, who's always looking for birds up and sees things that the average person doesn't see. Does your terrorist unit specialize in only seeing terrorism? Are we surrounded? How bad is it here in Jackson? How can you speak to that?
Well, we have people who are of concern here. We have people who we've investigated who there's reason to believe that they may have connections to terrorist organizations. They may be raising money for terrorist organizations, or they may be recruiting for terrorist organizations. The problem comes down to one where historically with the FBI, we've been an organization who solves crimes. And I would argue that we're the best when it comes to solving crimes. We're very, very good at what we do. Myself, I was trained as an interview and interrogation instructor, and I was also a hostage negotiator. I prided myself in being able to sit down with people who had done horrible things and develop rapport, minimize what they had done, and rationalize it with the ultimate goal of getting them to confess to this crime that they were accused of. That doesn't work now, where we can't be in that mode anymore. Now, if Osama bin Laden had the opportunity to push a button and annihilate us all in this country, I think without a doubt that he would. And he would do so thinking that he had God's blessings and that it was a good day for him. So I can't sit down with a person like that. So it's really changed a lot of the way we do business now. We're not seeing a terrorist behind every bush. We're not. When I'm dealing with lots and lots of Muslim Americans or people who want to be Muslim Americans, Muslims who are here in this country seeking citizenship, who are very, very honest, hardworking people who appreciate being in this country, want to be in this country, and are afraid of terrorists, absolutely afraid of terrorists. So, but we have enough work, we have enough concern. Prior to 9/11, there were situations where you've had our agent, very, very sharp agent out in Phoenix, came forward with a memo about the concern he had for people undergoing flight training. That should have been followed up on quicker than it was, clearly.
You're talking about Mohammed Atta and knowing about that. That was in Minneapolis or
no, I'm talking about out in Phoenix, the guy who wrote the memo.
Okay.
The problem, one of the problems we go to there is also, we are, like I said, in such a reactive mode prior to 9/11, reacting to crime, that our focus wasn't there. We also did not have the tools, the analytical capabilities. Now, if you're an intelligence agency, and we're a law enforcement agency that has an intelligence function, but if you're an intelligence agency, you can literally collect everything and throw it into a big pool and analyze it for what it's worth. We can't do that because we have to be prepared to go to court. So
you have to segregate the...
Exactly.
Let's pick up on this when we come back. We're going to take a short break and let's talk about the difference between law enforcement and intelligence, and maybe we can define what intelligence means. You're watching Civil Discourse. My name is Ken Hurley. This is a program sponsored by the American Civil Liberties Union, and our guest is Bob Cromwell, a special agent in charge of the FBI in Northern Florida. Thank you. We'll be right back.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine.
In these these turbulent times, let us not erode the liberties our country was built on.
Let it shine.
Larry Parker, National Honor Society student. Patricia Stevenson, stockbroker. Hector DeSario, systems analyst. Driving while black or brown isn't a crime. If it's happened to you, call us at 1-877-6-PROFILE and arrest the racism.
Welcome back to Civil Discourse, program sponsored by the American Civil Liberties Union. We're talking to Bob Cromwell, Special Agent in charge of the FBI. And we're getting ready to talk about the difference between law enforcement and intelligence. Those are huge topics by themselves. How do you define enforcement versus intelligence?
Well, in the intelligence realm, we're out there, and the other members of the law enforcement and intelligence community are out there gathering information that may or may not be admissible in court. But it's information that can be brought to the table and analyzed and used to determine if there is reason to believe that an event's about to occur, a crime has occurred, etc. Whereas in law enforcement, you're there trying to develop information that can be admissible in a court of law. Without information being admissible in a court of law, you're not going to be successful. The law enforcement officer is trying to put together a case that results in a prosecution and a conviction. The law enforcement officer is trying to solve a crime, whereas intelligence can be used for a myriad of things. Intelligence can be used for the decision makers back in Washington to use in the State Department. Intelligence can be used for the Department of Defense to decide where troops should be. There's just simply a myriad of uses for intelligence that it doesn't have to meet the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, which you would meet for going to court. But it's something that is put together with everything else to give you a total picture. And
so intelligence deals with things to occur in the future primarily, and enforcement is in the past.
Or no, not necessarily, because intelligence can render information that is very valuable for something that has occurred. As an example, you could be looking at an organization that is into insurance fraud. You could gather intelligence from someone who says that, you know, this guy has got no visible means of support 2 months ago, and now all of a sudden he's associated with this insurance company and he's driving a Mercedes. Well, that's intelligence. That's not necessarily evidence of a crime, but it could be something that an agency would look at to lead you further into that person.
Part of what we're dealing with is the horrendous nature of what terrorism seems to be. It's very difficult to define. The FBI has a definition. The USAPATRIOT Act has a new definition of domestic terrorism. Various other agencies have their definition of what terrorism is. Somebody said one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. I mean, there's all sorts of ways to try to come up with words to describe what happens. But in most of the definitions, it talks about a psychological fear, trying to manipulate either a political situation or a government or an entire group of people. They could be a religious group or some other kind of a group. And it is done through sometimes extremely heinous means. And what we're seeing today is it's these terrorists that we're talking about, Al-Qaeda and some of the other groups, are quite willing to give up their own lives in the process. How new is that to us in trying to protect what America is about?
It's very new. Prior to 9/11, there was instances. We had the bombing back in '91, I guess it was, at the World Trade Center, and we had
93
or 93.
Right,
yeah,
right.
we had other instances that certainly were terrorist acts on our soil, but nothing of the catastrophic nature that we saw on 9/11. Our homegrown terrorists, i.e. Timothy McVeigh, did a horrible act back in '95. That was, you know, unthinkable. Nobody had ever seen anything like that in our country before. And now there's still a concern that we have with other people in this country that, you know, a lot of the focus you go to is talking about the Middle Eastern terrorists or the fundamental Islamic terrorists, whatever that you want to call them, where we're still concerned about the homegrown domestic terrorists. People have their own agendas here, and it's something that we need to constantly be
Timothy
vigilant.
McVeigh, somebody told me once, I don't know how you feel about this because it's pretty hard, that was revenge more than terrorism. He was upset about Waco and Ruby Ridge.
You know, without having Timothy McVeigh here to answer those questions will be difficult, but Timothy McVeigh used to sit in a trailer in Kingman, Arizona with Michael Fortier, watching videos about Waco, talking about how it's just a matter of time before the government kicked the doors in and took away their guns. So it's very hard to know what his motivation was.
Yeah, but that still doesn't change the action that he took as a result of whatever he might have been thinking or how he evolved in his being. The action he took was horrendous and certainly comparable to anybody, a terrorist, whether these other folks that I was talking to call it that or not. It's something that has to be dealt with and dealt with severely, which is one of the things that the FBI seems to do extremely well. But we're dealing with a new dynamic in what you are coming. Since 9/11, your whole mission has changed. Correct?
Correct.
All right, and it's focused, as you said earlier, in terrorism and counterterrorism. And 45 days after 9/11, Congress gave the FBI and other law enforcement incredible new tools that, talking with some members of the FBI and some members of law enforcement, feel that these tools are in dire need to do the job that needs to be done. And talking with people like the ACLU, some say some of the sections of the USAPATRIOT Act goes a little too far in terms of breaching what might be called civil liberties. Case in point is Section 505, very contentious section. Lawsuits are in place now. Judges in New York ruled a certain way.
National security letter?
That's the national security letter. Before I get into too much detail, can you tell us what a national security letter is?
It amounts to an administrative subpoena. Rather than having a magistrate or a judge sign a subpoena for administrative records, in my position as special agent in charge, I can sign a letter, goes back to our headquarters and is disseminated from there to the phone company or to other agencies to acquire administrative records. It's very similar to the administrative subpoena power that exists and has existed for years in drug cases and healthcare fraud cases, wherein a supervisor, not even the special agent in charge, a supervisor of the FBI can be delegated the authority to sign an administrative subpoena to acquire phone records. Now, when we talk about phone records, it's not listening to phones, it's not wiretapping, it's toll records, it's pen and trace records, register records. Exactly, things like that show how the phone has been used or is going to be used. It does not include content. To get content still requires it's a major hurdle, a FISA. The difference between a FISA and a Title III wiretap in a criminal case is in a Title III wiretap, you go before a local judge. An affidavit is prepared, the assistant U.S. attorney pleads, and a local judge normally will issue the Title III wire intercept, whereas under the Patriot Act, or actually under previous law, national security law, the request goes back and goes before again, it's still a federal judge, and it's the same sort of judge that would be out here. They take turns doing it. A federal judge who views this information in camera in Washington and sits on there and decides whether or not to issue it. Now the thing about that is it goes through very, very rigorous screening, first of all, both through the national security law people at the FBI and then to the Department of Justice, where their office is over there, take a very, very close look. Now, this is not to say that there shouldn't be oversight. Congress has committees that look at this, are reported to, and look into this, and they are providing oversight. It can't be public because of the classified nature of some of the information. Again, you can use information that is potentially very, very dangerous to the person giving it to us if it were to come out in open court that this person is talking to us. We're dealing with people who don't think anything of killing. So if we develop cooperating people working for us in these countries, it would be the last thing that would be fair to them or fair to anybody else other than perhaps the terrorists to publish who they are.
Right.
So I know it's a very important thing that we follow these rules very carefully, and it's very important that we have oversight.
Right. Well, grand juries are secret for similar
Correct,
reasons,
correct.
In order to get the information and to protect people from physical harm. That's one of the reasons a grand jury was kept secret. But you mentioned the FISA court, and that's a lot of people probably don't understand exactly what that is. I'm not sure that I can fully understand what it is, other than it's a court. I think there's 11 FISA judges in the country, up from 7. They're named by the Chief Justice, and it's a secret court. The public cannot attend it.
Right.
And what the USAPATRIOT Act tells the judge in the FISA court, that the judge must approve your administrative subpoena. Now, there may be some paperwork that might not be involved, and you have to correct or something, and you have to go back and make some additions. But ultimately, all of those administrative subpoenas, from my understanding, are approved by that FISA
Now,
judge.
the FISA orders that go in there to request wiretaps, that is at the discretion of the judge. The judge is not compelled to sign that. The judge,
Which is different than the NSL.
Yes, the NSLs, it's an administrative process.
Right.
And I equate it with the drug cases and the healthcare fraud cases, except this is much more dangerous and there's much more at stake. Much more at stake.
Right. Tell me something. We're almost running out of time already. Tell me something that the FBI does locally. I know you have some community outreach programs, and talk a little bit about that, because we could spend hours on the USA Patriot Act alone, and maybe you'll come back someday, and I'd love to have you back as a guest, and maybe we can just focus on that, because that's up for renewal at the end of this year. And what we say at the ACLU, let's amend it, not extend it. There's some troubling sections in there, and I invite everybody to check out the ACLU webpage, aclu.org, and the FBI.gov website as well.
And there's another website, www.fbijobs.com, because we are hiring.
You're hiring.
And we're hiring both agents and professional support, and the support includes a myriad of technical abilities, language abilities, just about every language you can think of. So, but one of the things, to go back to your question, one of the things that we're doing here that I'm very pleased with, there's a historically black college nearby here in Gainesville, or in Tallahassee, I mean, Florida A&M University. And one semester a year now, we are sponsoring a marketing class where the students are marketing the FBI on campus. These are kids that are marketing majors. The idea is to plant the seeds, get them to know some FBI people, get them to think about the FBI as a viable career. Again, we have no trouble whatsoever finding young white men to apply to the FBI. That's the easy part. We want to, again, we're going back to the diversity discussion. We want to get a diverse crowd in.
Right. And part of the history of the FBI has been problematic with hiring other than white. But you've come a long way. I mean, you're out here right now talking about it, and we are out of time right now. I want to thank you for watching. You've been watching Civil Discourse. We'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
You have been watching a public access television program called Civil Discourse, sponsored by the American Civil Liberties Union of Greater Jacksonville, Florida. The ACLU is a private, nonprofit, nonpartisan membership organization. Our mission is to protect and advance the civil liberties and civil rights guaranteed by the United States Constitution, especially the principles contained in the Bill of Rights. We want to hear from you. Send us an email, share your views and opinions. If you're interested in appearing on the program, let us know. Friend or foe, we want you on the show. You may contact the ACLU in the following ways. Our telephone number is 904-396-5242. Our post office box is 5331 Jacksonville, Florida 32247. And our email address is aclujax@yahoo.com. My name is Ken Hurley. Thank you for participating in Civil Discourse.